Hello, friends. I'm your host, Dave Layton, and welcome to Signs of Our Time, discovering America's heritage one sign at a time. This podcast is designed to provide the story behind the story found on America's roadside historical signs. When I was a little boy growing up in the 50s and 60s, there were two famous bears that we all knew about. The first one, of course, was Yogi Bear. Yogi was a fictional rascal who, along with his sidekick Boo Boo Bear, was best known for stealing picnic baskets, or as Yogi called them, picnic baskets. And he was always giving Ranger Smith a lot of headaches. And Yogi had a girlfriend. Her name was Cindy Bear. The other bear, and one loved by children and many adults even today, was Smokey Bear, or as he became known, Smokey the Bear. Smokey is famous for his never-ending campaign to prevent forest fires. Here's the story behind the story of Smokey the Bear. In the early days of World War II, there was a fear that the enemies of the United States would start devastating wildfires. The Forestry Service and what was then called the Wartime Advertising Council created a fictional character called Smokey Bear. He was a symbol to prevent fires. Well, then the real Smokey Bear was born. In the spring of 1950, in the Capitan Mountains of New Mexico, a raging fire was spotted and a fire crew was dispatched to fight it. The first crew on the scene discovered a major wildfire sweeping along the ground between the trees, and it was being driven by strong winds. More crews reported from New Mexico and Texas, along with the New Mexico State Game Department, to try to fight the inferno. It was a devastating and extremely dangerous fire. At one point, it threatened the life of about 30 firefighters. They were caught directly in the path of the fire. They survived by lying face down on a rock slide for over an hour as the fire burned past. As they continued to battle to contain the fire, they received a report of a bear cub wandering near the fire line. Apparently, the mother had died, leaving the cub to its fate. The bear cub escaped with his life by climbing up a tree. Unfortunately, the tree was charred and the cub had badly burned paws and a hind leg, but he was still alive. The crew was able to rescue the cub from the tree. A local rancher, also a member of the crew, took the cub home. Later, a New Mexico Department of Game and Fish ranger heard about the cub, and he and the rancher put the cub on a plane to Santa Fe, where he received treatment for his burns. Well, it didn't take long for word to get out about the cub. His story was broadcasted nationwide, and the little cub became a celebrity. He was soon on his way to the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., becoming the living symbol of Smokey Bear fighting wildfires. As you can imagine, Smokey was adopted by children everywhere. He received so many gifts and letters that he was even given his own zip code. In case you're wondering what it is, it's 20252. Smokey remained at the zoo until his death in 1976. He was returned to his home to be buried at the Smokey Bear Historical Park in Capitan, New Mexico. Smokey continues today to be a wildfire prevention legend that's known and loved by all. Well, interestingly, Smokey's funeral was not a large gathering or with much fanfare. Certainly he was deserving of it, but it was decided to protect his dignity and legacy by having a simple burial. There's speculation that someone might have tried to vandalize the grave or to take the body and have it stuffed as a trophy. Well, his burial was overseen by 4 New Mexico park rangers. Just before they buried Smokey, the rangers were eating a late evening meal at a nearby cafe. Also at the cafe were 5 hunters. The hunters found out what the plans were for burying Smokey and followed the rangers as they were leaving. As the rangers were leaving, they asked the hunters to help them. They quickly agreed and helped carry Smokey to the gravesite. By the way, the hunters were officially considered pallbearers for Smokey and were recognized as much later by the New Mexico Forest Service. There was a special memorial service a month later at Smokey's burial site. Today, there's a special plaque placed on a large stone over the grave, marking Smokey's final resting place in the shadows of the Capitan Mountain where he was found as a cub. Well, here's some other interesting facts about Smokey. Smokey was a black bear and weighed over 300 pounds. His name was officially Smokey Bear, but he became known as Smokey the Bear when in 1952 a song was written about him. His name was changed in the song to fit the rhythm. The song became so popular that Smokey became known as Smokey the Bear. Here's the words of the first verse of the song and the chorus. You might remember singing it as a child. Here's how it goes. With a ranger's hat and shovel and a pair of dungarees, you will find him in the forest, always sniffing at the breeze. People stop and pay attention when he tells them to beware, because everybody knows that he's the fire prevention bear. Smokey the Bear, Smokey the Bear, prowling and growling and sniffing the air. He can find a fire before it starts to flame. That's why they call him Smokey. That's how he got his name. Well, although other artists contributed to the image of Smokey over the years, the first artist to draw him on a poster was Albert Stale in 1944. He's also credited with adding the famous slogan, "Only you can prevent forest fires." Smokey's favorite clothes are his personalized ranger hat, blue jeans and belt, and he's usually seen standing and carrying a shovel, ready to put out campfires. And of course, we know that Smokey's favorite food is honey. But what he's most famous for is his stern warning, only you can prevent forest fires. Well, friends, there you have it. A story behind the story from America's historical signs and markers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to subscribe and continue listening as we bring more episodes about the rich heritage of our great nation. Please share this podcast with others. If you have interesting stories about historical signs and markers, email me at americanhistoricalmarkers@gmail.com. That's americanhistoricalmarkers@gmail.com. Maybe your story behind the story will be featured. I'm your host, Dave Layton, and thank you for listening and safe travels.